What's the financial investment of outsourcing your entire podcast production and post-production? How do you do a seasonal podcast, and does doing that hurt your momentum? Are 3 episodes enough to launch with? These are just some of the questions we'll be answering on this episode of Podcasting for Experts. You're listening to Podcasting for Experts, with honest conversations about using podcasting as a tool to grow your reach, increase your audience, make a positive impact on the world, and most importantly, to get paid for your efforts. I'm your host, Jess, and we are Pristine Podcasts. Let's talk podcasting. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Podcasting for Experts, the show for business owners and industry experts that want to successfully leverage podcasting as part of their marketing strategy. I'm Jess, I'm the Chief Marketer at Pristine Podcasts, and today we're going to be answering some podcast questions. Woohoo! If you also want to leave us a question to be answered on the show, then head to pristinepodcast.com/podcast, press the mic button at the bottom right corner of the screen and send us your questions. And don't forget to mention the name of your show as well, and then we can include your question in one of the upcoming episodes. So with that said, let's get right to the questions. Question number 1. What is the typical financial investment of podcasting per month if you outsource all of it? So editing, social media, graphics, the whole shebang. So my answer to that one is that it really depends. And this was an ongoing joke at one of our meetups the other day. This is like the lawyer's answer. It really depends. But to be honest, there isn't enough information in the question to be able to answer that sufficiently. So I would need to know how many episodes are there? Are they solo episodes, interviews? Are there any recording issues? How long are the episodes on average? So I will give you some general info based on what I've seen around and what we charge to do that kind of thing. So we have an editing package that includes show notes as well as uploading the final episode to the podcast host. And we charge around $900 a month for a weekly show where the episodes are usually solo or with one guest, and they're not longer than 1 hour raw audio. So that means we get your episode, we edit it, we finish it all off, we place your ads and do all that stuff. Then we upload that episode to the host. We schedule it to be published on the date it's supposed to be published. We write your short description to go onto your host, as well as your full-on show notes to go on your website. And then we go send them to you to publish them. So for the social media and graphics and all that stuff, it really depends on how many graphics do you want, how many different platforms do the posts need to be adjusted for. So you could be paying anything for another 30 to easily $100 extra per episode, depending on how much content you want and need, and whether there's videos to be repurposed for Reels and TikTok and stuff like that. So it really does vary. And the best thing that you can do is go and get some quotes from people that you think might be able to do that for you. We also offer a management package where we do those things, but we also manage the entire podcast process. And that starts at like $1,500 a month and then goes up to as much as $3,000 for including finding sponsorships and guest bookings and those kind of things. So pricing is always dependent on who's doing it, what value are they providing, and yeah, it really does depend. So that is my serious answer. Okay, next question. I am in need of advice on how to do a seasonal podcast. How do I do it? How long do I go in between seasons? Will doing this affect the downloads, the momentum, and the growth of the show? Do I tell the audience when I'm coming back? Is there anything else that I should be mindful of if I go this route? Thanks. Okay, so I personally like the idea of running in seasons because it gives things a little bit of a flow. It gives you a little break in between to think of how you want to mix things up for the next season. And it's personally something that I like. It also helps if you have other things that you're doing in your business, like you have specific launches that you're doing at specific times of the year. So then you can really tie in the seasons of the podcast into the actual business. However, I know everyone's always looking for like a clear-cut right and wrong answer, but for so many things in life, there isn't a clear-cut right and wrong answer, and this is another one of them. So whatever you do is I'd recommend that you develop a pattern and you stick to it. So you're going to do maybe 12 weeks of content, and then you're going to do 6 weeks off, and you're going to do 12 weeks of content followed by 6 weeks off. And you're going to keep going like that. That will give people some predictability. Your seasons are always the same length, and then you're always away for the same time. However, the time that the show is on in a year is more than the time that the show is off, taking a break. I think that's important because if I see a show and they put out, one season in January and one in August, and I get like 5 episodes per season, that's 10 episodes in 52 weeks. I'm probably not going to bother to subscribe to your podcast because it just clutters up my app and I'm not really getting all that much content. So this time off, though, that's in between the seasons, that is going to be a really important time for you. So you do want to prepare people for one season ending. And at the end of that season, you want to already have a rough idea of what's coming up in the new season so that you can let people know, A, how long are you off for? B, what are you working on in this time? C, what's coming up in the new season? Who are you talking to? Have you booked any guests yet? Is there anything interesting coming up topic-wise? Is there a reason for people to come back at the end of that season? And that's basically what you want to tell people as early as possible. Then the time that you are off, in quotation marks, I'm doing some air quotations, the time that you're off isn't time where you're sitting in silence. It's time where you are creating and you are promoting your upcoming season and you're sort of sharing things from behind the scenes. What are you working on? Who have you been talking to? Have you been doing interviews with people? And you really keep your community in the loop. And then you start doing countdowns, 4 more weeks, 3 more weeks, 2 more weeks, 1 more week. So like you have to really keep it going. This isn't time where you go completely dead silent for people to forget that you exist. So depending on how you do that, yes, it can affect your downloads and your momentum, because if people aren't excited to see you back, or they've kind of lost you from the radar completely because you went silent for 6 months and they didn't understand why you stopped putting out content and they just assumed you'd pot faded like 70% of all shows. And then they probably just went to listen to something else again. So yeah, you have to be smart about how you do it. But there isn't a right or wrong way. Next question. When do I ask sponsors to pay? 50% upfront and the rest later, for example? So when we book sponsors for our clients, we actually take the entire payment upfront and we deliver on the promised schedule. I would not take partial payments. We found major brands to be extremely slow to deal with. Payments can take ages anyways to kind of process through their internal system and to be paid out. And we honestly don't even place a single ad on any podcast without having received payment, because we also had 2 major brands in the past year that were actually non-payers. And to be honest, it doesn't work that way. Like you can't expect that small creators will place an ad on their podcast for you and you're a big brand and then you don't deliver on your side of the bargain, which is paying for a service that you received. So yeah, we don't do any of that anymore, and we take all payments in full upfront. Whichever way you do it, make sure that you have a contract, and if you do ask people to only pay 50% upfront, then make sure that you're happy to take the 50%. And even if they don't make the second payment, you're either happy to take the legal route or you're happy to just let it go, in which case you've only been paid 50% of what you wanted to be paid. So you're always running that risk. Decide what's worth it for you, put a solid contract in place, get legal advice, which I can't give to you, and then, try it out and see what happens. But yeah, I would get as much of the payment upfront. Right, next question. Is there a best day and time, best in quotation marks, best day and time to launch a new podcast? Launch it earlier in the week. Podcast downloads are still now higher during the weekdays than they are on weekends. Otherwise, the success of your podcast launch is going to depend on the work that you've done to hype up your show pre-launching it, and whether you even have any existing audience anywhere else that is large enough to be kind of carried across to the podcast platform. If you don't have a large enough audience anyways, or you haven't been doing any pre-launching activities and nobody knows that you're dropping a podcast, then to be honest, it's going to be a slow climb anyways. And whether you publish on a Tuesday or a Thursday isn't going to make a major difference, because you will only have as many downloads as you're telling people about it anyways. No one is suddenly going to discover it in their podcast app because you put it there, right? So if you haven't been doing the pre-work and you haven't got an audience, then do it how you like it, and then test it, and then try out different days of the week over time and see what works best for you. I mostly see that our Tuesday episode does a way better than our Friday episode. So I don't know, maybe I will go to dropping 2 on a Tuesday. Maybe I will go to dropping 1 on Monday, 1 on Tuesday. I don't know. Okay, next question. Does anyone have suggestions for a good app that allows listeners to leave a voice message which can be inserted later into a podcast or live broadcast? Yes. So I've been trying out podinbox.com. It's free. It's easy to set up. You can get started straight away. If you want to try it out from a user perspective, don't forget to leave us a voice message, pristinepodcast.com/podcast. Just press the icon on the bottom right corner of the screen to send us the message, and then you'll see what it looks and feels like. There's also SpeakPipe, and I saw a couple of other tools recently, but they all have more complicated pricing plans, and it's sort of turned into something that I'd have to research in depth to be able to compare the offers. And it's not worth it to me. I just want people to send me a voice message. So that's how simple it is. I mean, technically, you could probably also use something like a Voxer to get people to Vox you an audio message to your account, and then you could download it from there and then include it. But I don't know. I just want to keep it simple. So I've been trying out podinbox.com. It's, working, and I'm happy to continue to use it. So far, no bad feedback about it. Okay, next we have, do I need to get an intro done, or can I start my show without it and add it later if I want to? Again, there's no right or wrong answer. So podcasting isn't a fixed thing to do with a set rule book. The good thing about podcasting is that it's not like YouTube, where if you delete a video that you uploaded to YouTube some time ago, you lose all of the stats on the episode and everything, and you're basically re-uploading a completely new episode. With podcasting, it's not like that. You can actually just replace the files, and and then you just have the up-to-date file there. So what I recommend is that if it is too much hassle for you to create your own intro and you're not good at it, and you don't want to outsource it to anyone else, we actually make intros and outros for people. I think it's $90 for an intro and $120, if I'm not wrong, for intro and outro. So if you don't want to do it yourself, or you can't do it yourself and you don't want to outsource it, then start without it. Just make sure that you keep the edited audio safe somewhere, either local storage, remote storage, whatever you've picked as your file storage method. And then keep all of those files. And then if you're saying, hey, in 3 months, my podcast is working for me, I love it, I want to continue, then go and get someone to make you an intro and either put it together yourself or just send someone the existing files and have them insert an intro and or an outro. But there is no requirement that you have to have an intro to be able to start your podcast. In the beginning, I think it's more important that you start and that you get into the swing of doing it, and then you can decide to invest a bit more. Music does set a pretty strong auditory anchor, and it does influence people's mood quite significantly. So it is a super great thing to have. Just keep it short with whatever you're making, because the people who are regular listeners have to listen to it again week on week on week on week. So you don't want to make it too long. There's some intros that go on for like a minute, and I think that's a little bit too much, particularly if you're also in future going to be adding ads at the start of the episode. I feel like some podcasts have like 3-4 minutes of ads, then 4 minutes of waffle, and I'm almost 10 minutes in and I still haven't heard anything of what I'm here for. So that's a little bit off-putting for people. Question number 1, I'm planning on recording 3 episodes and a trailer to release on launch day. Is that enough? What is enough? Enough to do what? So it depends on what you want to achieve with that. For most people, yes, that is more than enough. If, however, you're trying to port a really large audience from your email list to your podcast, and you're trying to get featured everywhere, and you're trying to hit the charts and whatever else you're trying to do, then you may want to have a few more episodes so that you can get more momentum going in the first 2 weeks. Or you could drop, 3 episodes the first day. You could drop 5 episodes the next day. You could drop another 5 episodes the week after, just to start the engine, so to say. And something fun that you can do if you're doing a bigger launch like that, you could do like an audio scavenger hunt and give people something to win. So let's say you have someone listen to 15 episodes or something, and in every single episode there is a clue that gives you an answer that you have to submit to be in for a chance to win something pretty amazing. Like, for example, make it something big if you're going to do something like that, but make it like, 3 months of coaching or a space in your mastermind that's normally thousands. They can win it, but they have to listen to all of the episodes that you've launched with and, scavenger hunt the bits that you've hidden inside the episode. So all of that kind of stuff makes it fun. It encourages people to listen to all of the episodes, not just the 1 or 2 where they like the topic. And then you can drop more episodes and then you will get more downloads. But this doesn't make a floating difference if you don't have an audience. And if you don't care for getting, featured somewhere and whatnot, then don't bother wasting your time on that. Just focus on making really good content and growing an audience. Then the second question in this was, aside from emailing podcast episodes to my list each week and posting about it on social media, are there any other ways you would suggest I promote my podcast? Yes, there is. As soon as your podcast is live and you've got that launch thing done, go and be a guest on as many podcasts as possible where there's the same people listening that might want to listen to your podcast. Do 5, 6, 8, 10 interviews a month for the next 6 months, and you will see a huge result with that. Okay, and now the final question. What metrics should I watch for to judge if my podcast is growing and to know where I can improve into the future? So if you're podcasting for business, and that's probably why you're here, the question that I always like to think of is, what results would you like to achieve with your podcast? And then go find a way to measure that more or less reliably. So is it leads that you want? So you want people to opt into your free stuff? Then measure how many people are going to your freebie specific landing page directly from a unique URL that you only give out on your podcast. And then measure how many people convert over a period of time and then make that number go up. Or maybe you want to measure how many people convert from your show notes. So are your show notes intriguing people to sign up from the website? Or maybe you want to know how many new people are discovering your website because they Googled for something that brought them to the show notes of one of your episodes. Or you want to measure how many of those people that then came from Google to your show notes, how many of them turned into clients and bought something, If you're trying to really get out there and become more visible, then count the number of interviews that you've done and how many people have signed up to your lead magnet from that interview. How many people are coming from other people's websites where you have done guest interviews, all that kind of stuff. If you really want to focusing on making quality content that converts, then we'll check the completion rate of your episodes. Are people listening to an average of 30% of your episode? Or are people listening to an average of like 80% of your episode? That tells you an awful lot as to how good the content is that you're making and whether people want to know what else you have to say. So what to measure always depends on the outcome that you want to achieve. So think of something you want to achieve, then create a hypothesis where you're like, I think I could achieve that if I did this. Then do that thing, measure it, and then check your hypothesis. Were you right or were you wrong? Did I get the result that you wanted or not? And then set up a new test and measure again. Okay. So I don't have like blanket measurements where I'm like, oh, you always have to measure these 5 things or else you don't know what you're doing. I don't think it works like that. Everyone has different results. Everyone has a different approach, and everyone might want to measure different things. For some people, it's just an achievement to go once a week for 52 weeks to create a piece of content like this and to publish it. For some people, that is a huge achievement. So let's not make these generalized assumptions that everyone wants the same thing or that everyone has the same standards as you do. You pick what you want to achieve, and then you measure that, and then you try and improve it, And it doesn't matter what someone else's opt-in rate is. It doesn't matter how many leads someone else gets. You start with your starting point in mind, and then you just make that get better, a little bit better, every week, every month, every year, and over time, you're going to have a huge improvement. Right. With that question answered, that's it from me for this episode. If you want to submit a question, remember pristinepodcasts.com/podcast. Use the mic icon at the bottom right corner of your screen and send in your question via our pod inbox. And maybe next time we'll have some audio messages to feature on the show. I would really love to do that. I love to answer your questions. And yeah, don't forget, if you do send us an audio recording, tell us who you are and what the name of your show is, so that people that hear you on this podcast have a chance to check you out. Okay? As always, I hope you have an amazing day, and I will see you for the next one. That's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you. If you are an established business owner and you want to get help with managing, editing, and producing your podcast, then you can book a free call with me anytime to discuss your needs. You can find the calendar booking at pristinepodcast.com/contact.